Hello and welcome. In this video, we'll be discussing how to add fractions that are both positive and negative. So the first thing I want you to note is that there are many ways to indicate that a fraction is negative. So you'll see that in example 1, and this is how Alex generally prefers its notation, is that the negative sign is in front of the entire fraction. Well, that's not the only way to indicate that a fraction is negative. So I've copied their notation up here, but that's equivalent to writing the negative sign on top. In fact, I think this second way is actually a more useful way to indicate that a fraction is negative. Now, how do I know that those two are equivalent? Well, if we use our division rules for integers, what you know is that a negative divided by a positive is negative. And remember, after all, this fraction bar is just a division sign. Similarly, over here, I've got a positive over a positive, which is positive, and then this negative sign in front says take the opposite of that. So the opposite of a positive would be negative. So either way, we're going to get a negative overall. The third way, and the least useful way, is when they put the negative sign on the bottom with the 2 and leave the top, or the 1, positive. You're going to see this notation a lot as well. Whenever you see this, change it. Okay, so my suggestion is to always change to this notation. Since they're all equivalent, we may as well use the one that's most useful. Okay, so here are the steps for adding fractions that are both positive and negative. We're going to start with number 1 here. If you haven't had the chance to watch the video on just adding fractions with different denominators, make sure you go back and do that before you continue with this video. So our first step, again, is going to be to change the notation. So instead of having the negative sign in front, I'm going to sneak it upstairs with the 1. And then the rest of this is just like adding fractions with different denominators. So in this case, our least common denominator would be 6. So the first fraction, I would multiply top and bottom by 3. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times negative 1 is negative 3. And then the second fraction, I would multiply top and bottom by 2. So that would get me 6 on the bottom, and 2 times 4 is 8 on top. And now the last step is just to add what's left. So I add the tops. So negative 3 plus 8 is 5. And if you didn't get the chance to watch the video on adding integers, positive and negative numbers, make sure you go back and do that so you know where this 5 came from. And then again, when we're adding fractions, the denominator doesn't change. So our final answer is going to be 5 over 6. Okay, I want you to try number 2 on your own. Pause the video and then restart it after you've had the opportunity to try it. Okay, so for number 2, again, the first step would be to change the notation, because anytime you have a negative on the bottom, it's difficult to work with. So what I'm doing is changing it to our most useful notation. And again, that does not change the value of the fraction. It just makes this easier to work with. Then we have to get our common denominator, which in this case would be 42. So we would have to multiply the first fraction, top and bottom, by 6. Second fraction, we would have to multiply top and bottom by 7. And then if we add our numerators, negative 49 plus 48 is negative 1. And then, of course, our denominator stays the same.